Veterans, today we're going to talk about how to win your VA case. Okay, how to master it with all three pillars that are outlined in Caluza v. Brown. Your case does not stand a chance without it. Let's go. What's going on, vets? Thank you for jumping on the call with us today. Super excited to share some information with you guys. I'm here with my wingman, my battle buddy, Al Romero.
What's up, guys? Al Romero. I'm a Army vet. Mark is also an Army vet. And we're just here to share information with you guys that we think is valuable. Today, we'll be talking specifically about a very important case. And this case involves Mario Caluza. You've probably heard of the Caluza Triangle. And that's what this is going to be focusing on. And it's super valuable because this is information that has impacted so many veterans' claims. And we just want to give you some background info on that.
Yes, hi, I'm Mark Mitchell. I'm an Air Force veteran. I was a dog handler. I'm here with my buddy Al, the Ranger. And this is an important case, guys. This case is foundational to veterans and just knowing their rights and being empowered with this information. So I wanted to put this together for y'all and just share it a little bit more in depth. If you guys want to dive even deeper, we are going to share a link. So please click that and then we'll give you a little bit more information on the case itself. But this case is Caluza v. Brown. Many of you have heard the Caluza Triangle, so we're going to explain that a little bit here. This case was decided in 1995. Here's the irony. The veteran, Mario Caluza, actually lost this case. He was a World War II combat veteran. He fought in the Philippines, and he went through years and years of appeals. And following that VA process, he ultimately did not receive the compensation that he sought. But what did come from it is the legal framework that really paved the way, and what came out of his case has protected hundreds, if not thousands, of veterans since.
So let's talk a little bit about Mario Caluza. So he was an Army vet, and in November of 1944, he was in active duty in a war zone, and they were fighting Japanese forces. So this was in the Basong Pass, and it's very, very brutal mountain stronghold. Some of you guys may have been, deployed to Afghanistan. Over there, it's the same way. So in 1987, more than 40 years after his service, Mario filed a VA claim, and he actually had a wound, and it was shrapnel in his lower right leg. So this happened during combat, and he was treated at a battalion aid station. So basically, he didn't get any medical records, and he submit a lot of evidence with his claim. He also had fellow soldiers, and they submit witness statements, basically speaking up for Mario that, hey, this did happen in service. He also had private physicians writing letters, and he still did not get the compensation that he deserved. So for me, I actually had a similar incident while I was in the Army in Afghanistan. So at that time, I injured my left knee, and when I after our op, I came back and I went to get help. They treated me, they gave me a knee brace and just told me, all right, keep on moving, right? That was never documented. So, some of those things are going to happen, especially when you're active duty or, reserve, whatever. But when you're somewhere where they don't have the ability to document medical records, that can definitely happen.
Man, it's a story that's all too common, right? I can't tell you how many veterans I've spoken with or that I'm friends with that, we serve together, or just the small community that we have, right? There's so many different situations and combat veterans who get their denial letters, and it just makes no sense to them. They've got the proof, the DD 214 shows, hey, I've been deployed, I've been to Afghanistan. I don't understand why they're not accepting my claim or letting it go through the approval process. But this is a legal process, and really it comes down to three pieces of evidence. In his case specifically, what the problem was is two pieces of evidence that were working against him. So first, in September, his service records, he listed that he had a musculoskeletal status, and he simply put that he was okay, no wounds, no injury documented. Again, super common, especially when you're in the middle of the fight. Nobody wants to be a sick ranger. Even the doctors, when you do go to the doctor, take a Motrin, change your socks, and press, right? You want to get back into the fight, and you want to be able to be there for your brothers and your sisters. And, in those moments, it's easy to not realize the importance of medical documentation. The second thing, which was far more damaging, there was an affidavit from Mario himself that was signed in just 2 years after his service ended. He actually stated that he received no wounds during his military service. On top of that, the witness accounts had some inconsistencies, right? So the wound location shifted between the different accounts. There were some witnesses that placed his treatment at one location, while others named a different one. The year of the injury changed between filings. Again, you can realize how, being that this is a legal process, how important and crucial it is to ensure that everything is lined up and that all the boxes are checked in order to meet the elements of this Caluza triangle. The Board of Veteran Appeals did deny the claim twice, actually, and Mario continued to appeal and appealed all the way until he got to the federal courts. And that's where history was made.
Yeah, so, Mark, you bring up a really important point. So the VA system, it's structured around evidence, right? It's not how much effort that you put into your claim. If you don't have the correct evidence, it's going to be the same outcome. So let's talk a little bit about the legal framework. So there's two federal statutes at the heart of this case, and understanding them is going to be key in understanding why Mario Caluza's case matters so much. So Statute 1, the well-grounded claim. The statute placed the initial burden on veterans to submit evidence sufficient to make their claim well-grounded, meaning plausible and capable of substantiation. And in the case of Caluza, the court laid out exactly a well-grounded claim it requires. So this is where the Caluza triangle comes in. These are the three things, right? So number one is going to be you need a current disability. So a current disability is a disability that's been diagnosed, I would say, probably within the last 6 months, right? That's going to be better for you. The VA is going to acknowledge that, right? You don't want to have a diagnosis from 4 years ago and you haven't sought treatment after that. So also the second framework is going to be an in-service event. So this is evidence that something happened during your military service. And the third part of that framework is a nexus, right? So this is a super important part. A lot of vets miss having a nexus to connect their conditions. Say if we're talking about a secondary condition to a primary condition, right? For example, say if I injured my knee and then my knee has caused or worsened, caused me to have a back injury, right? So my back would be secondary to my knee. So the nexus is super important, right? That's a medical professional that is connecting the dots between those conditions, and the VA accepts that as credible medical evidence. So if you miss any of those, the triangle is it's just going to collapse, right? The claim fails. That three-part test it's the standard, right? So you can see why Mario Caluza was such an important case in the entire Veterans Benefits Administration.
Yeah, man, let's talk about that a little bit too, because I know for a dog handler and for a ranger, sometimes it can be a little frustrating trying to navigate and read the law, but this is all information that is laid out in that 38 Code of Federal Regulations, right? So you see the little funny symbol, if you click the link and you take a look at these statutes, that little symbol is the section where you can actually go and you can find yourself where these laws are and what the laws are. Triangle, right? That's the big one, the common one we hear. I like to think of it like a tripod. If you're missing one of the legs in a tripod, them other two are coming down, right? There's no way for it to stand if they don't have all three, which is crucial when we're doing fully developed claims, especially when it comes to, you hit an excellent point with the nexus, right? So many vets get deterred and they don't feel like because they didn't get seen by the doctor or they weren't, going through the process to have medical documentation and records, they think that there's just no shot. And it's just not accurate and true. Like Al said, if you've got a condition, there's other ways than just that primary connection. You can look at secondary and potentially get things connected that were caused, aggravated. There's all kinds of elements that you can look at to get these things service connected and get the benefits that you guys deserve. Another important statute that I want to share with you guys, and this is one of the more frustrating ones that we run into. I was in Afghanistan myself, and I've got many friends who've deployed far more times than I, and they've got all this experience, and they don't have that documentation to meet the legal requirements, even though they know that they've been there, they've done that, they've seen that. But this statute, this section, is the combat veterans exception. Okay, and it's designed specifically for combat veterans like Mario. Congress passed it in 1941 during World War II, and they passed it because that they understood that soldiers get wounded in the field, they get patched up, and they get sent back into the fight. Official records don't always exist. I know for me, anytime anything came up, you're not taking my dog, bro. You're not taking my gun and putting me on the do not arm list. But why this is so core and what it really says in this statute, I'm going to read this verbatim for you guys, and then I'll give you the plain English. But the verbatim is: the Secretary shall accept as sufficient proof of service connection, satisfactory lay or other evidence of service, incurrence, or aggravation, if consistent with the circumstances, conditions, or hardships of such evidence, notwithstanding the fact that there is no official record of such incurrence. Okay, I'm a 3L, about to graduate law school. I'm not an attorney yet, but I struggle reading that. I'm a dog handler at heart, but in plain English, what that means is that combat veterans can use their own testimony, their personal statements. There's specific forms and documentation that can be completed, buddy statements, right? That's lay evidence, and that can be used to establish an injury that happened during service, even without official medical records. So the absence of records, guys, alone cannot sink or get your claim denied. But this is critical, and the evidence still has to be satisfactory, right? It's still a process. You still have to meet that burden and those elements. But what the court defined as credible, and credibility is evaluated by looking at the internal consistency and plausibility on whether those accounts line up with each other, right? If my boy Al is typing up a buddy letter for me, thanks Al, and I write a personal statement, and that statement contradicts what Al is saying, and those two things have different dates, have different input, then that makes the output difficult to have the consistency necessary to meet that legal framework. But that court has also established that once a combat veteran satisfies those elements, in section 1154 Bravo that the only way the VA can rebut it is with clear and convincing evidence. So there's a higher standard than just the usual preponderance test, which is significant protection.
So I kind of also just want to point out too, so combat vets, you have a significant advantage. However, service connection is not automatic, right? You still need to prove that in-service event happened. But one thing is that your word can carry a ton of weight if it's credible and it's consistent, right? So you still need a nexus and you still need a diagnosis, right? But your word carries a lot more weight, especially because sometimes we're not getting those medical records, right? So let's talk about why Mario lost. So with all of those protections, why did Mario Caluza lose his case? The court found his evidence was simply not credible, not because the VA ignored it, because the overall evidence did not hold together. And the court described Mario's 1947 affidavit, his own signed statement saying he had no wounds. So that's a huge thing, right? Sometimes we're in the midst of, in the fog of war, right? And things happen, and we're not thinking about those. I want to check on, hey, how is my friend? Hey, how are you doing? Right? Check on your battle buddies, and sometimes you just pass that off and you just sign it, even though you have an injury. It's just, hey, this guy's a lot worse than me. Check him out, right? So the inconsistencies in the witness statements, the shifting wound locations, right? He said that his wound was in one of his legs, and then later he switched it to another leg. But really, the wound happened to his left leg, right? And the conflicting account, right? That's why it's so important to be consistent. The conflicting account made the VA question whether or not he was telling the truth. So the court did not find one technical error. The board had improperly weighed the 1945 service medical records and the wrong evidentiary standard, but it ruled the error was harmless because the 1947 affidavit was devastating on its own, right? He put in an affidavit that he was okay, right? Even though he really was not okay. So the Court of Veteran Appeals affirmed the denial in 1995, and the federal court affirmed again in February 1996. Mario's long fight was over.
Man, I want to touch on that too, because to this day, I've been out now almost as long as I was in. And to this day, the lingo is just ingrained in my brain, right? My wife makes fun of me all the time because I'll be talking to little man and good to go? Like, Roger, good to go. All right, copy, tracking, right? All these things that are just so in our DNA, man, we can't fight it. So anytime anything comes up or anytime there was an issue, or you just press, bro, from being hung over at PT to, having those injuries and really dealing with things that you might not even necessarily be aware that you're currently dealing with, because the response is good to go, Sarge, press, right? So I understand legally why Mario and the Board of Veteran Appeals came to these conclusions, but I also understand as a brother and as a veteran why there were inconsistencies. Don't even get started on the impact and the effect that mental health and trauma and certain things can do. Memory impairment is so common, man. It's this case was 20 years later, right? So there's so many different factors that have to be weighed and considered when we're talking about these things, because even though there are inconsistencies, it does not make your story inconsistent. or not valid or not true or not good enough for the claim to go through the process. I really want to hit home on that because I know for a lot of us, right, it's just Ranger up. It's just, whatever lingo your branch specifically uses, we have that mindset and we have that mentality. And that only hurts us, and that only hurts our families, and that only hurts the evidence. And that's what this is about, man. It's not a personal thing. It's not about your story. It's not about not believing it or not wanting to hear it or listen to it. It's about evidence. If you look at it like a criminal case, right? That's why that current diagnosis is crucial. If you're going and you're getting tried for your life for murder, you're not going to want to try and find evidence that's 50 years old and leave it at that, right? Like, no, you want things that you can speak to that empower your case. And that's what this is. It's a case. You have to fight and you have to do what's necessary in the legal world. And with all the legal talk and putting it in plain English can be helpful, but that doesn't remove the burden and that doesn't remove what's needed to have success in this process. I do want to touch, so the court actually found a technical error. Another common thing with vets, man, is they'll appeal it, right? That's step one, higher level review, supplemental claim, whatever route direction is best. It's case by case, but a lot of times they'll find an error and they'll admit, hey, yeah, we found something that we should have done and that wasn't applied. And that can be exciting because they're like, oh, okay, cool, now they're listening. And then it's the same outcome, denial. And that's even more frustrating because you thought you were good to go. But it's all about technicalities, guys. The technical error that the court found in this case was that the board improperly weighed the service medical record under the wrong evidentiary standard. But it ruled that the error was harmless because the affidavit was devastating enough on its own. So, plain English, they acknowledged the missing piece. But what weighed more than that and what they took into consideration that had a bigger impact in the decision-making process was still the evidence that was submitted by the veteran, right? And that evidence was missing those pieces and contradictory, canine at heart, to those pieces that are missing, or to the pieces he thought he was establishing. But the court affirmed its denial, right? So after coming to that conclusion, the court affirmed the denial in 95, and then the federal circuit affirmed that in February that Mario's long fight was over. What's this mean, right? What does it mean for the claim? What does it mean for your claim? Al, I'm gonna let you kind of dive a little bit deeper here into this tripod and to what each leg means for the tripod and for the triangle here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up a super important point. Like, how many vets have you worked with that had an injury, in service 20 years ago, and maybe it wasn't documented properly? Like, I feel like that happens so often. So basically,
bro, can I just say, let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah, go for it, dude.
I know Vietnam vets who were like helicopter machine gunners denied for tinnitus. It's just crazy, man. Again, you hear these stories and these testimonies from veterans, and it's like, first of all, you should have been getting this from the start, and you should have been helped from the get-go. And that's really why our mission here, bro, is educate and empower the veterans, and we want to be able to empower them with information, because that's all this is. It's information that you can educate yourself on properly to be able to fight nonsense like a machine gunner getting denied tinnitus, nonsense like a PTSD claim after 5 combat deployments, and these guys are not getting connected for things that are clearly there, but just that burden and that legal process really takes its toll, man. But yeah. Sorry to cut you off, bro. I'll let you get back to the triangle.
No, you're good. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I actually worked with a Vietnam vet who had multiple gunshot wounds, and he was rated at 10%. Right? He had Purple Heart, all of that, and he was rated at 10%. That was, a very impactful case for me, and I was so excited to see the life change, that he had, with his years left, that he was able to finally get the compensation that he deserved. But let's talk about what this means for your claim. So this part, it matters a lot, and you might know someone that's navigating their VA claim right now. So this is information that you want to give them to empower them, to educate them. So you really want to know your triangle. You want to know the three pieces of the triangle. You want a current diagnosis, an in-service event, and then also you need a nexus or a link, right, from a medical provider that is basically connecting the dots for your case. So you need a nexus letter in most cases, and it's non-negotiable, right? If you're missing that nexus letter, I've seen so many vets claims get denied because they had submitted a claim and it was a valid claim, but they were missing the medical evidence, the link, the nexus that connects those claims together, that connects those uh, disabilities together. So a current diagnosis from a medical professional, an in-service event, and also a nexus, right? So those are the three legs. But so a nexus letter is you need a licensed medical professional, and that's a physician, a psychologist, or another qualified provider to basically dive into your medical records. They're going to do a deep dive. They're going to see all the conditions that you've been diagnosed with, and then after that, they're going to connect those conditions, right? Even if it's a secondary, if it's a primary, right? You need a nexus to be able to make that tripod stand on its own. So,
Let me
for
touch on Nexus real quick,
yeah,
bro. So I hear that word and again, it's one of those things that, okay, it's VA specific and it's needed, it's an element. But Nexus is universal. What helped me think of it, hopefully this helps somebody, but don't think Nexus and get intimidated by something that might be uncommon everyday language, right? All a nexus is, it's that medical link between the first two elements, right? That diagnosis and then your service or anything else that's currently service connected. I'm Italian, I talk with my hands. But they ultimately, it's just the opinion, right? And we're not going to let one opinion deter or be that determining factor, right? These doctors are not God. They are not the end all be all of that opinion. So a lot of times what happens, a veteran will go through this whole process. They'll pour their heart out to the C&P examiner. They'll tell their story. They'll be vulnerable. They'll hit all the points that they need to hit to check all the right boxes. But then if that box, that nexus isn't that probability that it is to the service or it is to that condition that's currently connected, it's a scale, right? So that opinion, if it leans one way or another, is really how they have it's not a loophole, but it's how they have the ability to not service connect your claim. But just like any opinion, if I don't like what you got to tell me, and whether it's valid or not, I can go get another opinion. I can go to a private medical provider or a medical service that at the end of the day, when they look at the whole case and they take the time to actually talk to the veteran, hear the veteran's story, really put all the pieces together and not just a quick 30-minute exam, right? There's records reviews that has to be done. And, they can dive deeper into it to really make that connection and have a stronger opinion even, right? Some opinions are stronger than others. So I just wanted to clear that up. Sorry for interjecting again, bro. But Nexus, to me, you think of that, don't think intimidating. Think it's just an opinion, bro. It's just the medical link between the things that you're claiming and your military service.
that's right. So, many vets lose at the Board of Veterans Appeals, and the reason is because their case was never built correctly from the very start, right? Their case was missing one of the three legs of the Caluza triangle. And even though you go ahead and file an appeal to the Board of Veteran Appeals, it's still going to be denied if you're missing one of those critical pieces, right? So, if you do receive a BVA denial and the decision never mentions a favorable medical opinion or a witness statement, or mentions it, but it never explains why it was rejected. So that's a Caluza violation. The board is legally required to address material favorable evidence. And I know my boy Mark in law school, he can probably speak to that more than I can. Do you want to add anything there, Mark?
I think the only thing that I would add is you need to take the same mindset you had in service, the same mindset you had deployed, and apply it to the current fight, to the current mission, right? You don't take one bad letter and then take that as defeat. It's not defeat. And I actually go above and beyond that to say it gives you a roadmap to what those elements are. So another pathway that was created through this case, and that's super important, is the VA now can't just say denied, tough luck, have a good day, right? They have to give reasoning behind this stuff. They have to explain what's the missing link. So a lot of times in your decision letters, you'll see all the codes and all the mumbo jumbo, copy and paste paragraphs, but you'll also see favorable findings. And they'll let you know, hey, we see that you have a current diagnosis and we acknowledge that you're dealing and suffering with these severe symptoms. We just don't accept that nexus, right? There's ways to fight that, and there's ways to whatever is in that letter, we can use that as a roadmap to really educate ourselves and to really know, hey, it's not personal, but I got to get back in the fight and I got to do what I got to do to address what it is they're telling me that they're missing, that they need, or that they don't like, right? Whatever the case is, whatever the denial is, that reasoning can be powerful in allowing you to come up with that best path forward. A lot of times it is as simple as a diagnosis. A lot of vets, hey, we acknowledge you were in Afghanistan. We acknowledge there's a medical link between these two, but you don't, and you haven't been diagnosed with a disability, which goes back to us not liking doctors. And I feel you, and I'm with you, but a lot of times that's what's needed. And then once you have that record and you have that documentation, you've got that missing element. Get back in the fight, bro. Hey, you told me this. Here you go. This is what was missing. Now what? And then it gets back into the process. And ideally, and what we love to see happen is then the VA makes that correction, right? The VA wants as much horror stories as we hear in all these situations. They do want to help the veterans, right? That's what the VA is there for. So you just have to give them what they need to be able to make those connections and to legally justify why things are connected. Again, not personal, bros, not personal, sisters. It's just evidence. Think of it like a legal case, because that's exactly what this is. It's a process. There's laws in place, protections, good and bad, right? These protections are intended to protect the veterans and our community, and there's a lot of great stuff out there for us. So before I keep going on a tangent here, that's what I would add with the BVA, right? Don't let it intimidate you. Don't let it scare you. Mario continued to fight it beyond the BVA. There's courts and federal courts that go past just the Board of Veteran Appeals, right? You got the CVAC. You've got the federal courts that go above and beyond to, hey, eventually they're going to get it right. Eventually they're going to get the information that they need that fulfills that missing link between the two. And there's different ways to do it, right? It's a case-by-case basis. Every veteran's story, every veteran's experience, it's all different. And we're one big team, but it's an individual thing that's needed when you're addressing these things in these decision letters.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. And when you go to the VA and you get medical treatment, it's very important to check your blue button report, because a lot of times the medical provider will miss critical evidence for your claim, or say that when they ask you those questions, hey, are you suicidal, are you this and that, and you know what, maybe that day you weren't feeling suicidal, or maybe that day you were having a good day. um, you know those records can actually be used against you when you file your claim. So it's really important to pay attention to what the medical providers are putting in your Blue Button records, because I can't tell you how many times I've checked my Blue Button records and the medical provider just put something that was so false and not even close to what I told them. So let's kind of wrap this up. Um, so Mario Caluza, he was a combat vet. He fought in the mountains of the Philippines, and he came home. He raised his family. Decades later, he was trying to get service connection for injuries that he had in the military, and he was denied. He lost, and even though he lost, he gave every future vet a roadmap, the Caluza Triangle. Right, current disability, in-service event, nexus, the three corners. So it's really important that you know and you understand the Caluza Triangle, you understand what's required, and you are submitting a fully developed claim. If you're denied, that doesn't mean that your case is gone and you can't appeal it. Right, there are ways around it. You can submit a supplemental claim, and when you do that, you're adding new and relevant medical evidence. You can submit a HLR, which is a higher level review, and you can even, like Mario, submit a claim to the BVA. Right, but if you don't have those three pillars, your case has a very strong chance of being denied, and that's not what you want. And I've been there. I'm sure Mark has been there. Many of my friends have been there. And sometimes we're lost and we don't know, hey, I don't know what to do next. But it's very important to get with someone that can break down exactly what you need and what areas you're missing, and then point you in the right direction to set you up for a fully developed claim. I hope this helped you guys. If it did, please share it with a vet that is in the middle of a claim right now, or they're thinking about submitting a claim for a condition that they deserve. Then please reach out. We'd love to help you. And I'll let Mark kind of give any last party words.
Yeah, man. If you guys listened up to this point, thank you. And please, this information, I had an old mentor, knowledge is power. And that's so true, but action has to come with that knowledge, right? So it's on you as the veteran to know it, to build it, and to take charge of your rights. This is what this is. It's your right. And if the board ever ignores your evidence, especially without explanation, you have the right to fight that. You don't have to fight it alone. I didn't fight it alone. I hope that this reaches a veteran. So please share it with the veterans, because just knowing this can be empowering to how and what they need to do next. And if you don't know what you need to do next, we are here to help you with that. So much love to my veterans. Get back in the fight. And yeah, till next time.